ready to blast off. We're taking a deep dive into humanity's future in space today. We've got a really cool mix of YouTube videos to guide us from channels like Neatling, Isaac Arthur, Kai Planet, and Smark.
Sounds like a pretty fascinating lineup.
Oh, it is. They cover a huge range of stuff, like space colonization scenarios, future geopolitics, even some seriously mind-blowing technologies that could totally change society as we know it.
Well, I have to admit, I'm intrigued. Where should we even begin with all that? What's the big push, the main motivation for humans to pack up and move beyond Earth?
Yeah, that's a great question. What makes us want to leave this perfectly good planet?
Well, according to these sources, there are really two major drivers. First, the idea of protecting humanity from, extinction-level events. The kind of threats we face right here on Earth.
Okay, I'm following. You mean things like asteroid impacts or some catastrophic climate disaster?
Exactly. Or even, pandemics. Basically, it's like the ultimate insurance policy for humanity. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially when that basket is planet Earth.
Right, spread out a little so we don't get completely wiped out if something goes terribly wrong here. That makes a lot of sense. So what's the other big driver?
Opportunity. Tapping into the vast resources and economic potential that space offers. I mean, imagine harnessing almost limitless solar energy, mining asteroids for rare metals, even manufacturing in zero gravity.
Wow, it's like a gold rush, but in space.
It kind of is. It could be the start of an economic boom unlike anything we've ever seen.
It makes you wonder, is there something inside us that makes us just want to keep pushing further? Always seeking new frontiers and possibilities.
Well, Spark actually suggests that space colonization could be the next stage of human evolution. It's driven by the same instincts that led us to populate the whole Earth in the first place.
That's a pretty interesting idea. So where do we even start? We've got these immediate goals and then these huge, almost science fiction visions of the distant future.
Yeah, you're right. And when it comes to those immediate goals, Kai Planet really emphasizes the importance of colonizing the moon first.
Okay, the moon. Why the moon?
They see it as the perfect place to set up an industrial base, kind of like the foundation we can build on to reach further out into space. To Mars, the asteroid belt, maybe even beyond.
So it's like a stepping stone, or maybe like a launch pad to help us get to those other places.
Exactly. And it's not just symbolic. The moon actually has some serious practical advantages too. Low gravity, abundant resources, and of course, it's pretty close to Earth. It's a great place to test out large-scale space construction and resource extraction.
They almost make it sound like the moon isn't just a pit stop, but a place where people could actually live.
That's exactly what Kai Planet is suggesting. They believe the moon could support a self-sustaining civilization, maybe even with millions of inhabitants one day.
Millions of people on the moon. I have to admit, I always just pictured it as like a barren, lifeless rock.
It's a common image for sure. But Kai Planet says we can use the resources on the moon in some amazing ways. We can extract oxygen from lunar dust, create water from the lunar regolith.
Regolith? What's that?
Oh, it's that layer of loose rock and dust on the surface. Anyway, we can even build massive underground cities, protected from radiation.
So basically, creating a kind of Earth-like environment, but underground.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And, while Mars might seem more appealing at first glance, both planets would require some kind of underground living anyway. At least in the near future, the moon is just a more practical, more economical way to get things started.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's not just about making things comfortable, right? It's about access to resources and having that potential for economic growth.
Right. Speaking of economic growth, though, we can't ignore the geopolitical side of all this. Needling paints a really interesting picture of a multipolar world emerging from all this space exploration.
So we're not just talking about scientific advancements, but a whole shift in the global balance of power.
Exactly. Needling talks about the rise of new superpowers like China, India, and maybe even Indonesia, challenging the U.S. and Europe in space.
Wow. So what's pushing this shift?
Self-sufficiency in space, starting with the moon. In the future, if space is the ultimate competitive arena, whoever controls the resources and the infrastructure will have a huge advantage.
Feels like we're about to see a new space race, but with even higher stakes.
Definitely a possibility. And as humanity pushes further out, those technologies we develop, they'll inevitably impact society back here on Earth too.
Needling even talks about incredible advances in AI and anti-aging technologies.
Imagine a world where AI takes over entire industries, leading to like a post-scarcity society where work is optional. And anti-aging treatments could totally change how we think about lifespan and demographics. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's almost impossible to even picture. What kind of changes to society would we even see?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Needling stresses that the transition to this new reality will probably be pretty chaotic. We could see both amazing and terrifying outcomes as different societies try to cope with these radical advancements.
Exhilarating and a little bit scary all at the same time.
Definitely. And, we've only just started to explore what these sources have to offer.
Well, listeners, you heard it here first. We've laid the groundwork for our space journey, and it only gets more exciting from here.
So last time we looked at the reasons why humanity might want to colonize space, but how do we actually get it done?
Right. How do we actually make it happen? It's one thing to dream about living on the moon or Mars, but it's another thing entirely to actually get there and, build a whole society. What's the tech going to look like? What needs to happen?
Well, if you ask me, the biggest hurdle, the elephant in the room really is the cost. It just costs so much to get anything into space.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. It's not exactly like booking a plane ticket.
No, not quite. Isaac Arthur actually breaks down the economics of space travel really well, and it basically comes down to reusability.
Reusability? You mean like being able to use the same spacecraft multiple times?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Right now, most rockets are basically designed to be used once, and, that gets really expensive really fast.
So what we need is something like a space shuttle or, I don't know, like a space plane, something we can use over and over again without having to build a whole new one every single time.
Exactly. And the really exciting thing is we're actually starting to see that happen. Companies like SpaceX, with their Starship program, are working on developing fully reusable rockets. If they can pull it off, it could totally change the game, make space travel way more affordable.
That would be huge. Okay, so cheaper access to space, that's a big one. What else? What other cool technologies are we going to need?
Well, Kite Planet talks a lot about the potential of using lunar resources. We talked before about how we can extract oxygen and water from the moon, but it goes way beyond that. They think lunar regolith could be incredibly valuable for construction.
Wait, remind me, what's regolith again?
It's that layer of loose rock and dust that covers the moon's surface.
Oh, right. So are they saying we could, use that stuff to build structures on the moon?
That's the idea. Instead of hauling all our building materials from Earth, we could just, use what's already there.
That's way more efficient. And Spark mentioned something about 3D printing buildings on the moon, right?
Yeah, they talked about companies like Contour Crafting and Foster Plus Partners who are actually developing technology to 3D print entire structures using lunar regolith. Imagine that lunar habitats, factories, even launch pads, all made from materials found right there on the moon.
That's so cool. But, okay, even if we can build stuff on the moon, what about power? We can't exactly run an extension cord from Earth to the moon.
No, we can't. And that's where things get tricky. One option is solar power, obviously. I mean, the moon has no atmosphere to block the sunlight, which is a huge plus. The problem is those long lunar nights.
Oh, right. So how do you deal with that? Giant batteries.
Well, Spark actually suggests building multiple solar farms, spread out around the moon, so there's always at least one catching the sun.
That's pretty clever. Any other options? What about nuclear power?
Actually, yeah. Kite Planet makes a really good argument for using nuclear power, especially in those early stages of lunar development. It's reliable, which is a big deal. Obviously, there are safety concerns and the whole waste disposal issue to think about.
Okay, makes sense. So we've got transportation figured out, construction, energy. But what about people? How are people going to actually live and work in these off-world environments? What about life support?
Right, and that's where things get really complex. For short trips, you can get by with life support systems that are kind of like what you'd find on a submarine. But if we're talking about long-term settlements, well, that requires something completely different.
Like what?
We're talking about bioregenerative life support systems.
I'm not sure I've heard of those. What are they?
It's basically about creating a closed-loop system that mimics how things work on Earth.
So like a self-sustaining bubble.
Yeah, kind of. Picture greenhouses producing food and oxygen, water recycling systems that clean and reuse the water, and even systems that turn waste products into valuable resources. The idea is to create an environment where nothing is wasted.
Wow, it sounds incredibly complicated. But it seems like it would have to be. We're talking about creating a whole new world, basically, from scratch.
It's a massive undertaking, that's for sure. And then there's the health aspect, too. I mean, we evolved to live on Earth with its gravity and atmosphere and everything. Living in space or on the moon is going to have some effects on the human body.
I can imagine.
Sport goes into some of the health concerns like bone and muscle loss in low-gravity environments. They talk about things like, really intense exercise regimes and even some more sci-fi stuff like artificial gravity.
So it's not enough to just build houses and stuff. We have to create environments where people can actually thrive. It can't just be about surviving.
Absolutely. And speaking of creating new environments, another thing we have to think about is governance. How are these settlements going to be managed? Will they be extensions of Earth nations or will they become something totally new?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can already see those classic sci-fi stories playing out with Martian colonies declaring independence from Earth and all that.
It's definitely a popular theme. But Isaac Arthur actually suggests that in the near future, these settlements will probably be closely tied to Earth. They'll be more like states or provinces that rely on Earth for support and governance.
That makes sense for the moon or even Mars. But what about settlements further out, like in the asteroid belt or beyond? Wouldn't those have to be more independent?
That's where things get really interesting, and it's something we'll be digging into in our next episode. As settlements become more self-reliant, and as the distances get greater, new forms of governance are bound to emerge. It's a future full of potential, but, also potential problems.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Reusable rockets, lunar construction, bioregenerative life support. It's pretty clear that colonizing space is a huge, complex undertaking.
Absolutely. It really shows human ingenuity and ambition. And even though the challenges are immense, the potential payoffs are even bigger, I think.
So we've talked about why we might want to go to space and even how we might get there. But what does it really mean for humanity to become, a multi-planetary species?
Yeah, it's a huge question, right? I mean, Needling even describes it as like these little settlements scattered all across the solar system, kind of like those research outposts in Antarctica. Makes you realize just how isolated these communities could end up being.
Yeah, that's true. It's not like popping over to visit grandma, is it? We're talking about journeys that would take months, maybe years. That kind of isolation's got to have a pretty big impact on people.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just the physical distance either. The unique challenges of living in those kinds of extreme environments, it could lead to entirely new cultures, new societies even.
So it's not just expanding our physical presence out there, but our cultural and social diversity too.
Exactly. It's like this giant experiment in human evolution playing out across the solar system.
Mhm.
But, and here's the big question, how will these different cultures interact? Will it be all cooperation and, kumbaya? Or will there be competition and conflict? Will these settlements stay connected to Earth, or will they, break away and do their own thing?
It's like all those classic sci-fi stories about, Martian colonies rebelling against Earth control, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty popular theme. But I think the thing to remember is these challenges aren't really new, are they? We've been dealing with cultural clashes, fighting over resources, struggling for power. I mean, that's human history in a nutshell, isn't it?
So the question is, can we learn from our mistakes? Can we do things differently in space? Can we actually break those cycles?
That's the big challenge, and it's going to take a lot of foresight and collaboration. It also brings up what might be the biggest ethical question we face, which is our responsibility to any potential life we might find out there.
Oh, right. We can't just go barging in and repeating the same mistakes we made on Earth, can we? What if there's alien life out there? Even just like microbial life, what impact are we going to have?
That's the idea of planetary protection, and it's got to be a top priority if we want to be responsible space explorers.
It's a bit humbling, isn't it? We're not just explorers, we're stewards of these new worlds.
Exactly. We need a real shift in perspective. We're not just tourists passing through this vast universe.
Yeah.
We're part of this larger web of life, and our actions have consequences way beyond our little planet.
It's pretty inspiring stuff. A little daunting, but definitely inspiring. So, what would you say, what's the main takeaway from all these different sources?
For me, it's that the future of humanity in space, it's not set in stone. It's something we're actively creating right now with the choices we make, the technologies we develop, the values we prioritize.
Yeah, it really feels like we're at this pivotal moment in human history, and what we do now is going to have ripple effects for generations to come. Well, listeners, that about wraps up our deep dive into the future of space colonization. It's a future full of challenges, no doubt, but also amazing possibilities. It really makes you think, what role will you play in shaping this incredible journey? Will you be an explorer, an innovator, a peacemaker? The choices are yours, and the possibilities are as endless as space itself. Thanks for joining us on this adventure, folks.